Okay, so you done finally opened your brother LX3817A, right? And now you don't want to read the manual. You just want to go ahead and start sewing. But you don't even know how to work the thing. So now you're here with me and you want me to explain it all to you, right? Yeah, I know. Well, that's cool. I'm ready to go ahead and tell you. So go ahead and take your machine out the box. And let's turn it on and get started. Okay, now that you have your sewing machine on, you still can't sew yet. You still need to learn the parts of your machine. So just slow down, okay? Now, let's start with this right here. This is not your antenna. It's not here to grab a signal for your sewing machine. This is called your spool pin. You will grab your thread, sit it on here, and then you would thread your machine and thread it into the needle. This is your top thread. This other little thing that looks like an antenna in front of that is your bobbin winder. You would take your bobbin, which looks like this. You would thread your thread into this, sit it on top of here, click it to the right, and then you would wind your bobbin. This is the thread that goes at the bottom. These two connect, and that's what gives you a stitch. Okay, now let's focus on this part of the machine. This right here is your upper tension control dial. It's going to determine how tight this thread is going into your fabric. This right here is your stitch selector. So you will just turn this until you get to whichever stitch that you would want, and that's the stitch that you would see on your fabric. Now, when you're sewing, your fabric is going to feed in this way, which means it is going forward. But at the beginning and the end of your stitches, you have to stitch backwards, which means your fabric needs to come this way a couple stitches and then go back that way. So you would press this down, and that would allow for your stitches to back stitch. And then once you're ready to go forward again, you would simply just release this and your machine will start back sewing straight again. Now let's take a closer look at this area here. Of course, you have your needle here, which you would change that out depending on which fabric that you're using. Right here, up under your needle, is called your presser foot. Your presser foot is controlled by this little leverage here, which is your presser foot leverage. And if you press that down, you will see that your presser foot falls down. This right here is what keeps your fabric in place so that your fabric isn't moving everywhere. So if you didn't have this down, your fabric wouldn't just go straight in there. It would just be flopping like this, flopping like a fish, basically. So we're just going to lift this back up. And now we're going to take a look at this silver plate. This silver plate here is your needle plate. On your needle plate, you have these lines as well as these numbers. This is your seam gauges. These are here to be able to help you be able to sew straight, as well as for you to be able to make sure that you're sewing the right seam allowance. So if you had a pattern that called for a 1/2 inch seam allowance, this would be your line. You would line up your fabric up to this line, and you would sew along this line until you were finished, okay? Now, you have these holes in the needle plate, and it's actually up under your presser foot. You have these little things that look like teeth, right? These are considered your feed dogs. This is what pushes your fabric through the machine. So, if I was to move my needle up and down, you see that those feed dogs are moving back and forth. This is how your fabric has ability to be able to feed through there. So when your presser foot is down, now your fabric is now squished in between your presser foot and your feed dogs, which gives it that pressure to allow your fabric to feed that way. Now this little area here is where your bottom thread lives. So if you just open this, we're just going to call it a door. If you open the door, you will find that bobbin that I showed y'all earlier. It will have thread on there. You will sit it in there. You will, do the necessary things. And you will close that back up. And that's how that bottom thread will now be able to come up through, up under this little hole by the feed dogs, and the top thread and the bottom thread will meet in that hole and create your stitch. Now if you look on the side of your machine, you have this little thing that sticks out that has a razor in there. This right here is your thread cutter. You will be able to take your threads and just slice it across there and not necessarily need your scissors, but you always need the scissors, but this is just an extra tool for you to be able to use. Now if we turn your machine to the other side, you will find this wheel, these little air pockets, your on and off button, and your socket for your power and your control foot. Now let's go back to this wheel. This right here controls your needle. If you twist it, your needle will go up and down. And you also have this little indentation on it. And if you line it up to this little middle crack here, that's how you will know that your needle is in its utmost position. This right here is your air vent. You never want to have this covered. This is like you being at home in a hot house with no fan. You will overheat if you had it covered. You would want to keep this uncovered because this will keep your motor cool so that you can stitch as long as you needed to. Now remember, I said that this is your cords for your wall socket as well as your presser foot. So let's just take a look up under and find the presser foot. This is your gas pedal for the sewing machine. The harder down you press, the faster you sew. The least amount of pressure you put on there, the slower you sew. Okay, so now you done figured out all the parts of your sewing machine, because that was it. That was real simple, right? Like, I know you thought it was a lot, but anyways, now you're ready to learn how to thread your machine as well as thread your bobbin. Now, do you have your thread while you sitting up here watching me? Because you need to be doing this with me, not just watching, okay? Because you're so ready to sew anyway. Grab your thread, come on. So before you thread your machine down into the needle, you want to go ahead and thread your bobbin first, because without your bobbin, your top thread, it can do nothing, okay? So let's take our thread, and you want to put it on there where your thread is going to be coming off clockwise. After you've placed your thread on there, you want to take your thread and bring it in between here. And then you're going to take it to the front of this little wheel and wrap it around, making an X. After you make that X, you're going to take your bobbin, and you have a hole on this side as well as the other side. You only want to take it through one of those holes. So you're going to go through the middle and pull up through that hole like this. After that, you're going to place your bobbin on your bobbin winder and click it over to the right. Once you hear that click, your sewing machine pedal, your presser foot, will only control your bobbin. It will no longer control your needle. And you want to make sure you have a tall enough thread, because you don't want that too short starting your first couple stitches. So now at this point, you want to hold on to that tail of your thread, and you want to lightly press on your presser foot, and you're going to wind this just a couple of stitches, or a couple of twirls rather. After you get you a little bit of thread on your bobbin, you can then go ahead and cut this, and you'll have a small little tail on there. And from there, you just want to continue pressing your presser foot and winding your bobbin. And like I told you, the harder you press your presser foot, the faster it goes. The least amount of pressure you put, the slower it goes. So now you just want to wind your bobbin until it's finished. You will know when your bobbin is done winding, because as you can see, I'm pressing my presser foot and nothing is happening. So that means your bobbin has taken on the most thread that it can take on. So now you can just click this back to the left and then cut your thread so that now your bobbin is detached from your spool of thread. Now we need to insert the bobbin into the bobbin case. So we're going to open that door, and you want to have your bobbin where it is now facing counterclockwise, so this way. We're going to place it down in there, and then you have this little silver little hook right there. You want to make sure your thread goes under that, and then you can take it into this little course here, which helps you cut off that extra thread from your bobbin. And we'll just cut that off, and then place the door back onto the bobbin, and that's it. Now your bottom thread is ready to go. So now we need to thread the top so we can have that thread coming through the needle. So if you left your threads like I did, you still have it wrapped around that wheel. You just want to take your thread, unwrap it from that wheel, and then come down into this groove right here that is labeled number 2. So you're going to come down number 2, and then you're going to wrap your thread under your tension knob and come back up into this other groove here. And at the top of this groove, you will see this little silver thing, which is known as your take-up lever, and it has a hole in there. So you will take your thread, wrap it around the top like that, and then come back down this groove. Now I would like to mention, if you're threading your machine and you don't see this take up lever up here, that means your needle is not at its highest point. So you will just turn your hand wheel until you see this at the very top. After you've brought your thread down through the other groove, you will see that you have this little nook around your needle. You will take your thread and put your thread behind that nook, and making sure that your thread is in front of your needle, you're now going to thread your needle. After you've threaded your needle, you want to continue to make sure that your thread is in front of your needle, because it can get wrapped around sometimes if you do it wrong. And you're going to take your thread, bring it in between this little hole that's on your presser foot into the back. Now when you have your top thread, you want to make sure you have at least 4 to 5 inches, because if this is too short, your thread will just automatically unthread itself from your needle. So now we need to bring our bobbin thread up. To bring your bobbin thread, you want to continue holding your top thread, and you want to take your hand wheel and bring it down to lower your needle, turn it to lower the needle, and you will see that the bobbin thread pops up. If you're able to, you can just grab it or grab you some tweezers, and you want to pull that to the back as well, having about 4 to 5 inches. So you should have 2 threads coming to the back, and now your sewing machine has officially been threaded. Okay, now that we have all the basics out of the way, you know how to thread your machine and you know the parts of the machine. Now you can start sewing. Now you don't have to keep waiting, but you are going to practice first. So I want you to go and get you a square piece of fabric, or you can use some paper, and I want you to draw straight lines on them. And you better not freehand them lines, because if you freehand them lines, you'll never learn how to sew straight, because I know you don't know how to draw straight lines. So go ahead and go get that together, and I'll be here waiting on you, okay? Oh, okay. You got your stuff now? You ready? Alright, so now we're going to take this and we're going to put it into the sewing machine, and we're going to practice stitching straight lines. Okay, before we start stitching, I want you to take your upper tension knob and put it somewhere between 3 and 5. These are your average tensions that you will use on most fabrics, but it does vary, so you may have to, you know, switch it sometimes, but we're going to start here for testers. I also want you to pick a stitch between 6 and 10. These are your straight stitches. Now, I'm not your mama, so you can pick one of these zigzag stitches if you like, but because we're trying to learn how to stitch straight, you want to use a straight stitch. Now, the only difference between these stitches are the stitch width, which means how long your stitches are. So you can play around with these and change as you sew on different lines, but just pick one of these for now and let's practice. Okay, now to get your line to where it will be straight when you stitch, you have this little indent right here on your presser foot. You just want to take your fabric, line it up with that indent on your presser foot, and then lower your presser foot. Always remember, your presser foot needs to be lowered in order for your fabric to stay secure. Now we are just going to slowly stitch along that line, and make sure you use your reverse lever to get in the habit of back stitching. You only have to back stitch for about 2 to 4 stitches, and then continue on straight down this line. Going as slow as you need to make sure that you're staying on that line. And then I'm going to back stitch because I'm at the end, and then come forward again. And once you stop, you want to make sure your needle is at the highest position. Now I can lift my presser foot, pull my fabric from the back, and cut my threads. So here you will see I came off course a little bit because I tried to sew through the camera and that doesn't work. But I got it back straight and I back stitch. As you can see, those are my back stitches there and my back stitches there. So you just want to practice this along each line, and you can do the same thing for your zigzag stitches. Let me show you. Okay, so I'm now going to switch to number 3, which is this zigzag stitch, and I'm going to do the same thing with my fabric. So I'm going to put my fabric in here, line it up with that indent that's on my presser foot. I'm going to stitch forward a couple stitches, making sure that indent stay on the line. Do not follow your zigzag because it's going to jump back and forth over that line. You just want to make sure you're going straight. So I went forward a couple stitches. Now I'm going to go back a couple, and then I'm going to continue on down. Now I'm at the end, I'm going to back stitch again and then front stitch. Now I'm going to use my hand wheel, bring my needle up to the highest position, lift my presser foot, pull my fabric to the back, and snip those threads. So here you can see I stitch straight because my zigzags are falling along that line every time it's close to the line. So you just want to keep practicing this with whichever stitches that you want to use. And as far as your tension, you want to make sure your stitches are flat like this. Hold on, you will know that your tension is right when you see that your threads are flush to your fabric. So as you can see, my fabric and my stitches are all on one level, as well as if I flip it over, my stitches are flat. Now let me show you an example of a tension that is not correct. Okay, so here was our original stitches. As you can see, this is the back, this is the front. So we're looking at the bobbin thread for right now. So as you can see, it all looks like one. You don't see any like lumps or bumps. But if you come to this line that I did here with the loose tension, you can see it looked like I got little heels on top of my thread. This is because my bottom tension does not match my top tension for this thread. It is too loose. So when you're stitching, you want to have a seamless stitch. You want it to look cohesive and as one, not one thread being looser than the other. So that's just a little tip for you guys to go ahead and practice at home on your own. And you have now finished your first sewing course. And just like that, guys, you are now a beginner expert on how to use your Brother LX3817A. Let me get a clap. Yes. Now I think you're officially ready for your first sewing project. So hit that subscribe button, comment and like, and let me know if this video helped you. And then head over to my how to sew a tote bag video so that you can go ahead and get your first project done. Okay, so don't forget, my name is Blue and I'm with you, and I'll see you later, Gator.